Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today. Today's webinar by Endeavour Solutions and our GP support team is on Microsoft Copilot and specifically why finance should care. Invites have gone out to our Microsoft Dynamics GP clients and our Dynamics 365 Business Central clients, as well as posted publicly. So there may be some who are new to Endeavour. We're also recording this, hopefully able to share this after today's presentation. Next slide, Kevin. So today's agenda, we're basically looking at the landscape, how to access and use Microsoft Copilot, and then we'll get into pricing and next steps. Throughout, our host today, Kevin Hatt, who is our VP of Professional Services, will be transitioning between PowerPoint and live demo off of his computer. So we'll be bouncing back and forth, covering off a lot of items in today's agenda. And at the end, we will stop recording and have a general Q&A session to take some offline conversations. And obviously, as always, Endeavour is here to assist you and have additional conversations after today's webinar. Next slide. So we do want to do a quick poll. I had a build on this, but since we're in this mode, we're not going to have the build. So question number one, and don't, basically, if you see here, raise your hand if you have used ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot a few times or are heavily using it as of now. I see 6, 11, 14. Okay, so everyone, just about everyone has used ChatGPT or Copilot a few times, and that's why you're interested today. So thank you very much. Please lower your hand. You have to click on the raise hand, take that off. And we're going to do the next survey. How many are using Dynamics GP as your ERP system? Please raise your hand. And those that are waiting, the other one's going to be question number 3. So 9, 10 out of 25, so about 50% are using Dynamics GP. Please lower your hand. And question number 3. How many people are using Business Central as your ERP? We had 50% on GP. Looks like we may be getting close to 50% on Business Central, except for those who don't fully answer their questions, and that's fine. You can be shy. Looks about 40%. So we have 50% on Dynamics GP, 40% on Business Central, and that leaves about 10% undecided or deciding not to answer. Many may be transitioning between back and forth as well. Thanks for sharing that. This provides some nice context as we're going through today. So for leaving off the introductions, I'm going to pass this over to Kevin Hatt. He's our VP of Professional Services. Kevin is a key member of our internal think tank and cross-functional team within Endeavour, and we're pulling together a number of Copilot scenarios internally. And thankfully, Kevin has presented this a few times. And thank you, Kevin, for joining us today and presenting. I'll leave this over to you.
Good stuff. Thanks, Scott. Happy to be a champion and an advocate here for the AI and Copilot in particular. It was a year and a half ago when ChatGPT, many of you may know that name, came out, and I had a similar epiphany moment that a lot of people are as you start seeing it, understanding it, and using it a little bit. And over the last year, it's been very much a passion project for me to soak up as much as I could and get a chance to roll it out here internally at Endeavour Solutions and with some of the clients as well. So it's been obviously a very new product in a very new world starting just about 18 months ago. But the good news is it is still very, very new. The people that are attending this today, you're still the early adopters. You're not too late. You're not jumping in late. The fact that you're interested and willing to take an hour of your lunchtime to learn a little bit puts you squarely in the early adopters club. So what I want to try today to do is to help educate you a little bit just on the general AI and Copilot landscape, some use cases that are out there, some specific use cases that we are using internally, and some different ideas about where things are going. What I want to start with today is just an overview of the major AI companies and their products, the Copilot versions and how they fit in, and a very important slide about the Copilot architecture, because it does speak directly to some of the big unspoken fears around data security. So let's start with just a little bit of the current landscape for the AIs and LLMs. There's a lot of acronyms that are now being released in the AI world, and LLMs is another one of them, stands for Large Language Model. But really the whole AI landscape really kicked off into high gear in November of 2022 with a company called OpenAI when they released a product called ChatGPT. Now, this product was obviously preceded by some of the smart devices. Some of you might have the Amazon Alexa or the Google Home devices or Siri on your Apple phones. Those technically could be considered an AI of sorts, but they're very, very limited. You had to ask it exactly the right question in order to get a good answer. But I kind of defined the OpenAI release of ChatGPT in November of 22 as the real start. The first version that they released was 3.5. It was very quickly followed by ChatGPT 4. And then just literally last month, they rolled out their third iteration of it, ChatGPT 4 Omega, shortened down to ChatGPT 4.0. Microsoft was actually sort of the next into the ring in November of 2023. Now, it's kind of important to understand that Microsoft itself does not have a separate AI entity, if you will, or an AI product. Microsoft's play has been that they actually technically own 49% of the OpenAI company, and with that 49% ownership means that they've got the first usage rights of ChatGPT as the AI engine that's in Copilot. And that's something really important to keep in mind, that Copilot itself is not an AI. It's actually a service that makes use of the OpenAI ChatGPT as its brain, as its engine, if you will. So Copilot came out in November of 2023. It's been rapidly changing in iterations. The next major release was our friend Elon Musk, used to be Twitter, it's now X. In November of 2023, they released a product called Grok. This is a good one. I actually use it a fair bit on X. Its big claim to fame is that it's constantly learning and updating on current events through all of the X feeds. So it doesn't have that limitation about what date and time was the training done. It is constantly evolving through current events. December of 2023 saw Google release their Gemini product. They initially had some missteps and some rollout issues when they first released it. It is getting better. The Gemini product is climbing the leaderboards. There's it's almost like the robot wars where they do performance testing on all the AIs, and the Google Gemini is climbing the rankings quickly. The next folks to get into it was Meta, also known as Facebook. And just in April, a few months ago, April of 2024, they released one called Llama. Wherever you see the capital L's, it's going to stand for Large Language Model. And when Facebook Meta got into this one, it was really another epiphany moment, because what they've essentially done is they've put AI into the hands of 3 billion social media users across Facebook and Instagram. And this is 3 billion people now that are going to start using the Llama product for generative AI. Your Facebook and Instagram feeds are going to start to show some images that you will have to look 2-3 times to see, is that real? And it's getting harder and harder to tell what's real and what's generated. Shortly after Facebook got into the mix, Amazon came out with their product called Q. That was just recently in April 30th of 2024. And if you follow the AI field a little bit, you'll see two other names. One's called Anthropic. They have a product called Claude, and another company is Mistral. And there is a bunch more, but these big five are the big players in the AI fields. A lot of the other AIs that you're going to read about are micro-purpose, special purpose AIs. We're going to focus today on the Microsoft Copilot. So the first thing to understand about Copilot is there are a bunch of them. There is a general Copilot that everybody has access to for free with Bing. So if you go to bing.com, you're going to find a Copilot icon, and it will do good work for you in doing web searches and general AI inquiries. Microsoft also has the Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365. This is the one that we're going to focus on today because this is the Copilot that integrate in with all of the Microsoft 365 apps like Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Teams in particular. And just because it is Microsoft, and I love them, I've made a career out of working with Microsoft, but when they first start releasing products, it is a little bit of a free-for-all until the product naming conventions get established. So in addition to the Copilot for Microsoft 365, there are some special purpose Copilots that have a very narrow usage. And the first one is Copilot for Sales. And this one really is tailored for the sales teams. It integrates well with Dynamics 365 CRM. And the responses, though, and what it will do are very, very sales-centric. They're very focused on the process of selling, the pipeline, the communication from a sales perspective. And you'll see that particular icon, Copilot for Sales, showing up in different places in Outlook and in Teams. The other Copilot they have is Copilot for Service. Now, this one is, again, more of a special purpose designed specifically to work with Dynamic 365 customer service. So think support cases, field service cases, communicating with clients, things like that. But it is not a general AI. It is a Copilot specifically for service. Then to make things even more confusing, directly in Dynamics 365, if you have that system and you're in your CRM system, you're going to see a Copilot for Dynamics 365. And it's starting to show up in a few places in CRM. It will help you summarize some of maybe the support cases that you have open. It will offer some coaching in writing responses back to client. And then Microsoft is also releasing Copilot for Finance, but technically it's called Copilot for Finance for Outlook. Its function in life is to live in Outlook, but connects to the Dynamics 365 F&O product, not the Business Central, not Great Plains. It is designed right now to connect to the Enterprise F&O. And then Microsoft also has a Copilot for security. They have a Copilot for developers, and then they have a Copilot for Power Platform. So this is kind of one of the first things you got to kind of get your head wrapped around a little bit is it's not just one Copilot, it's many. And the one that we're going to focus on today is going to be the Copilot for Microsoft 365.
And Kevin, when you say it's many, there are actually individual Copilots that don't talk to each other. And
Correct.
I found that was interesting. It's basically, the analogy is they talk with an accent. So they put on the sales hat and they talk like a salesperson. They put on a service hat. They only give answers that have to do with customer service and have that hat, finance, etc. So today's Microsoft, or focused on the Microsoft 365, is really going to be a cross-platform. And talking to those on the line as a human being, as a user, and depending on how we ask our questions, I think there's a really strong impact for finance teams to be a early adopter and to improve their own internal productivity.
Yeah,
back
it's
to you,
a good
Kevin.
point, right? Because this is not an IT-led thing now. Because this is English language, because this is natural query, because this is talking to it and expressing what do you want it to do, it's not code and it's not IT. This has really shifted it out of the server room, out of the hands of IT, and it really starts to get a lot closer to sales and marketing, the finance group, which is well represented here today. So this is not something to be shied away from, thinking that it is an IT-led thing. We are into getting users now to adopt this, change behavior, and certainly out of the pure IT realm.
Great. Kevin, on your screen, I see a little resume slideshow. Can you click on the X just to hide that?
Thank you.
Beautiful.
This slide, I'm going to spend a little bit, just a couple of minutes talking about this slide. It looks very busy. It's there's a lot going on here, so I'm just going to put it in. Oh, my apologies. Presentation mode. Get back here. There we go. The reason I want to focus on this slide, this addresses the number one concern that I'm hearing from early adopters of Copilot. And their questions are all around the security of my data. And particularly this finance group that's on here, I know that's a concern that's top of mind for everybody. And I'm going to spend just a couple of moments here talking about the Microsoft 365 service boundary and how all of your data stays where it is in the Microsoft ecosystem. And the Microsoft Copilot is working within that service boundary. And although I'd mentioned that Microsoft owns 49% of OpenAI and is using ChatGPT as its large language model, the way they've designed this out of the gate is that everything is happening within the Microsoft service boundary. It's a long way of saying your data doesn't go anywhere. You don't have to be worried that you're sending your data out to the internet or to a third-party company and that they're mining your data. Your data stays within the service boundary, and the usage agreements with Microsoft means that they're not using your data as part of the training of these large language models. And it's actually really fascinating how this all works. And I'm just going to walk you through here really quickly. Copilot starts out here on the outside with this icon. This is technically a user that's going to send a prompt into Copilot. A prompt is just a fancy way of saying, what are the instructions or what is the ask that I'm making of Copilot? So a user would initiate a prompt. And the first thing that's happened is it's going into this thing called the Microsoft Copilot service. And that Microsoft Copilot service is basically the conductor in the middle. Not a lot of smarts in it. It is just passing data around between a couple of different areas. But with that initial prompt, the first thing that it's going to do is it is going to go out and begin collecting some data regarding your prompt. They call that grounding. And the grounding is happening in what's called the Microsoft Graph. And the Microsoft Graph is where all of your emails, all of the Outlook emails and your calendar, all of your files in SharePoint and in OneDrive, all of your meetings in Outlook and in Teams, all of the chats that are in Teams, calendars, contacts, basically everything that you've got stored in a Microsoft 365 tenant has been wrapped up in this thing called a graph. And the first thing that Copilot is doing is taking that prompt and it's going out to the Microsoft Graph and it's collecting a whole bunch of raw data from emails and files and all of this. Once it has collected all that information, what it's doing then is it's passing the original prompt and all of the data that it collected over to the large language model here. Now, this large language model, you can translate in your mind that this is ChatGPT. Technically, it's ChatGPT 4 right now, but it is passing it over to that large language model for it to do the thinking work, the analysis, and the response work. The important thing to keep in mind is that this large language model, ChatGPT, this is technically an Azure OpenAI instance that is maintained by Microsoft. OpenAI as a separate company has no access to the data. It doesn't even have access to this model. This is all self-contained within the service boundary of Microsoft 365 itself. And that one really speaks to the sanctity of the data. So a prompt has come in, it's collected a bunch of information from all of your emails and files and everything in the Microsoft Graph. It's passed it over to the large language model. ChatGPT then takes over. It does the analysis, comes out with a response. And then here's another piece of magic that happens is the Copilot service will take that response and it will go back to the Microsoft Graph and it will review that response for compliance and purview. Remember that it's providing emails and documents and files and chats and things like that. There's obviously a security concern about who should be able to see what. So the last step before Copilot sends back the responses is it evaluates all of that data against the security purview and compliance that's inherent in the Microsoft Graph. Once Copilot is satisfied that it's adhering to the compliance and the purview and the permissions, then and only then will it actually send the response back to the user. So there's a lot going on there, and this is all happening at light speed, and it's happening in more than one loop as it's checking through some things, but this is basically the loop that's happening. Also included in there is not only is the search happening against your existing Microsoft data and your files and your emails as well, but depending on the prompt that you use, it may go and use Bing to do a web search to collect other information to pass into the large language model, or it might be going to the Dataverse, or it may be using Power Platform services as a further source of data, as well as all of your emails and the files and the documents. And there can be other graph connectors as well. Things like Jira is out there, maybe a Smartsheet where you've got a lot of other external data, but it's using that as grounding data. I found this slide, although a little bit technical and dense, but it really helped me understand the security architecture that is built into Copilot.
Thanks, Kevin. I also appreciate, since 40% of our people are on Business Central, there are going to be ways to connect that to Business Central, and Business Central has tables that can go into the Dataverse and virtual tables. It's going to take it's not out of the box. It takes some configuration for those IT administrators to make sure they're connecting these things externally. But great sources of information to be contextual. I can definitely see when you start putting in parts in inventory, product catalogs, stuff that's in an ERP system, and having that as sort of that source of the truth in a controlled fashion, that it's your company's cloud tenant, your company's source of the truth, and then overlaying the security of, do you have access to see East region versus West region within your Business Central instance, and therefore does that translate to the answers within Copilot?
Okay, so that's a little bit of an orientation. Who are the players in the AI field? Where does Microsoft's Copilot fit into that? And a little bit of the architecture to hopefully ease the mind a little bit about security and permissions and the data. So let's take it down a level here. Is how do you actually access Copilot? First thing is you do have to have a license for the Copilot for Microsoft 365 that we're talking about. And at the end of the presentation, Scott will walk you through what the pricing is, how to order licenses on top of your existing Microsoft Office licenses. But I would say this about accessing Copilot is it is tricky depending on whether you have new or old Outlook or Teams. And any of you who've been in Outlook or Teams over the last year, you've seen in the top right-hand corner that they're desperately trying to get you to adopt the new Outlook and the new Teams. They're kind of in that transition. And it makes where Copilot shows up and when it shows up to be just a little bit of tricky right now. It will get better. It's in an awkward stage right now. The other comment that I would make is Copilot is actually everywhere with the different versions that they have, and each different flavor versions of Copilot can do different things. The last point I'd make is it's changing quickly. I had done this presentation 2 weeks ago, and I had to update it just for today because of some of the naming conventions and the changes that Microsoft was making just in the last 2 weeks. But fundamentally, you're going to access Copilot in one of 3 different places for the Copilot for Microsoft 365. You'll be able to access it in the Edge browser, in Microsoft Teams itself, and in Microsoft Outlook. Just a quick slide on the Teams, the Edge browser, and the Outlook 365. So now that we know what it is and where we can find it, let's get into a little bit of the using Copilot. And I'm going to show kind of 4 use cases that I found to be immediately helpful within our organization and some of the clients that I'm working with. The first one is meeting recap. Teams meetings, if you're hosting Teams meetings in Teams and doing a meeting recap, it's a huge win. How to summarize long emails, how to help you draft email responses and get coaching on drafts that you've done. And then there are the general AI inquiries that you can do, whether it's a web search or whether it's a search that's targeted on your own files and your own data. So I'm going to show you a slide, and then I'm going to flip over to Teams to kind of highlight how this works in practice. What I'm showing right now is a screenshot of what the meeting recap feature looks like in Teams. And if you have the Microsoft 365 Copilot enabled, you're going to see a new menu option at the top called Recap. And if you click on that recap, it's going to give you a couple of really great things. The first one is on the right-hand side, the AI notes. These AI notes are taking your transcript and it is boiling it down to the meeting notes. There are also views of who was speaking, what topics were discussed, and what they call the chapters concept. It's remarkably similar to how YouTube is kind of chunking down the videos. It basically means you don't have to watch the entire thing to pick out a specific topic that you're interested in. In this meeting recap in Teams, this is what we were finding was the biggest immediate win, both in terms of volume of information that we are getting thrown at us, our ability to synthesize this and boil it down, but also to send that out and share that information with people. And this one has been our biggest. So if you'll just give me a second, I'm going to flip over here to an actual instance of Microsoft Teams. And what I'm showing you here right now, everybody should recognize this, is after you finish a meeting, you will get a little chat that pops up in Teams, and typically it will show you the transcript and it will show you the recording that you could click on the recording. And if anybody was chatting during the meeting, you're going to be able to see that thread of chats. Well, here's where the magic starts. If you click on Recap. So this was a meeting that we had hosted internally a couple of weeks ago on the topic of the Sales Copilot. And the first thing I'm showing you is the AI notes that were generated. I didn't have to do these meeting notes. And it summarized the meeting notes at a top level. The first one is Kevin talked about AI, how it's surpassing other technological advancements. The next topic was the broader Microsoft Copilot infrastructure. And you'll notice that if I click on that, 2 things are happening. There are indented subtopics under that broad heading. And when I click on any one of these, the video itself is moving to that exact moment in the presentation where this topic was being discussed. And think about that for a second. I didn't provide it what the topics were. I didn't provide it the framework and the hierarchy of it. It has picked that up from analyzing the transcript and doing all that for us. And then, and this is the big time saver, if you've got other people that want to watch that meeting for a specific purpose, they don't necessarily have to watch the full 1 hour and 3 minutes just to find the 30 seconds that they're really interested in. With the meeting notes and the ability to click on it, it takes you right into that moment in time in the video.
I also like it for that little proof point. So if you don't fully trust what the summary is, okay, let me hear it from the actual person. I can click on, here's the summary, and then here's where that person said A, B, and C, either holding them accountable or just refining your understanding of the context.
Yeah, even the notes, but this is the speaker view. At what moment in time was a person speaking? And of course, I was doing a lot of talking during this meeting, but if you've got different meetings going on, there's usually one or two people in there that, boy, I'd really like to hear exactly what this person said. And if I was looking to understand what Chad said at this moment, I can click on exactly where he was speaking. It's taking me exactly to that moment in time. It saves a lot of scrolling through to pick out relevant information. There was 10 speakers that occurred during the meeting, and it will show you a list of all of the speakers. The other thing it will do for you is here in the topics is starting to break down granularly some of the individual topics that it was picking up. And as I move my mouse over these individual topics, you'll see the timeline here kind of changing colors, and it's showing you in context of the conversation what topic was being discussed when. And again, if you click on it, it will take you to that moment in the presentation when that was being discussed. Similar concept for the chapters where it's starting to break it down a little bit into the YouTube model where you can see what the different headings that were being discussed. This has been incredibly helpful for our team, both for the project managers that host the meetings and need to do meeting minutes, for the consultants that need to review it and pick out relevant details, but also our ability to share this with clients. The only entry point that you need to do to have this enabled for you is you need to have a Copilot license, step one. Step two is you must record and transcribe the meeting. That has to be, somebody's got to click on record and transcribe. The attendees have to be okay with that. And if you've done that, if you have a license and you clicked on record and transcribe, it means that anybody else that attended that meeting, if they have a similar Copilot license themselves, they will have access to this recap, even if they were not the meeting host, they were not the meeting organizer. And as a matter of fact, you can add people into this meeting after the fact, even though they did not attend, and it would give them the ability to see this recap information. So it's one thing to talk about this, but I'm just quickly going to copy all of this. I'm going to show you the level of detail that it's pulling out from an hour-long meeting. And I'm not going to ask you to read this. I'm just kind of illustrating a point that it is pulling out a really high level of detail. And what we're finding for the project managers and for people that host meetings and need to do meeting minutes is you don't have to write everything down in your notebook and then spend 2 hours after the meeting to transcribe and did I get everything and try to recreate everything in your mind. If you go through this, what you're going to find is it's got too much detail and a little bit repetitive. And what you're finding that the person that's doing the meeting notes is doing is chopping up some of this. They're editing it, not authoring it. And I'll say that again. They're not authoring it and creating it from scratch. They're being given a really good starting point. And that is, human beings, they hate a blank whiteboard or a blank page, but give them something written down. They're more than willing to criticize that and say, oh, that's not wrong. It's actually this. And the ability to turn around meetings and get meeting notes out to this extent has been incredibly helpful. And then the last little thing that it does for you is based on the transcript and the conversation, it will actually listen for specific follow-up tasks, and it will name the people that had committed to or were tasked with some of the follow-up tasks. Incredibly helpful. Okay, so that's the meeting recap in Teams. Let's move on a little bit to Outlook and some of the Copilot functionality directly related to emails and in Outlook. So this first one that I'm showing you on the slide deck is the ability to summarize an email. And I expect that many of you are like me, that sometimes we get bounced into a long email thread and your first instinct is scroll down to the bottom and read your full way up so that you get it, and you go down rabbit holes in the side and everything. But Copilot is now offering a little bit of a cheat code for you, if you will. It will summarize an email. Let me show you how that works in practice. So I'm in the new Outlook. I can tell that I've got the new Outlook. And I've got an email here that is a fairly good random sample. This email has actually got an error message that Business Central was throwing off. And rather than kind of reading it, I'm going to click on this big button that says Summarize by Copilot. And I'd actually done it last night, but they boiled it down to 5 lines. The client was typing instructions for the receipt of a purchase order to their China team and received an error message they did not experience yesterday. You, this being Kevin, suspected that they missed entering a dimension and asked for a screenshot. The error message referenced the dimension code value. Client tried it again and magically it worked. No further action was required. So it's gone through and intuited all of that just by reading that email. Very, very helpful. You know, we all get a lot of emails. We've got a lot of volume throwing at us, but having a decent summary that's one click away is incredibly helpful. Interesting thing here, I was testing this with a really long email thread that's like a ping pong ball. It got bounced back and forth. And I think I chose the 10th email out of 14 times that this was being bounced around. When I did the summary on the 10th email, it was smart enough to know that that email had continued above and beyond this. And it was actually doing a summary for the future emails that, I had not grabbed to ask it to do a summary. So it's got some really interesting features on it where you might not have even seen one of the other emails that's related to this one, but it will summarize it for you. Fair warning though, I have had some challenges with really, really long emails. Copilot does seem to squawk a little bit and says, yeah, this is a really, really long email. I'm just summarizing the top 4 or 5 instances of it. But again, it is very, very helpful. So that's reviewing an email, summarizing an email. If I was to reply to the email, Copilot has some excellent features in there. The first one is it can help you with a draft response. Second feature is it can help you coach a response that you may have written yourself. And this drafting with Copilot, this can be a game changer for people. A lot of people struggle they can talk a long time about something, but if you ask them to write it down, to send you an email, the results really may vary depending on the person's ability to actually clearly communicate in a concise fashion in an email. And this particular feature is a real game changer for some people. So let's take a look at it in practice. I'm going to go back to my email. I know what the summary is, so I'm going to collapse that. I'm going to click reply. And when I click reply, you're going to notice that the Copilot icon shows up on the ribbon. You'll also notice that I've mentioned that Copilot shows up in a lot of places, and there's also Copilot for Sales that shows up in an email, and Copilot for Service. They're a very special purpose. We're going to ignore them for today. And I'm going to ask Copilot to help draft a response to this. And when I click on that, it takes me into the draft where really all I'm doing is I'm prompting it and I'm telling it, what do I want to do here with this email? So I'm going to say thank you and ask 3 insightful questions. That's it. I'm not going to provide any other detail to it. Just say thank you and ask 3 insightful questions. I'll leave it up to it to figure out what the 3 insightful questions are. You can tune your draft. If you click on the response options, you can change the tone of it to be either really direct or neutral or casual, formal. They even threw in a little Easter egg here that you can make your responses in a poem. And I've started to get some poems back from people. It's kind of a little tongue-in-cheek here internally. You can also control the length that it's going to generate a response to short, medium, or long. I found after playing that the casual tone is probably the best tone for, back and forth with some clients or people internally. And I tend to like the longer one just so I can evaluate it. So say thank you and ask 3 insightful questions, and then you click on generate.
I love watching this bar after seeing your architecture, imagining the email going out to the service going to the graph, the service going to the GTP, going back to the graph, then back out to reality.
Yeah. So this is kind of the epiphany moment for a few people when they see this. Thank you for letting me know the issue is resolved. I'm glad it works now. Good email etiquette, right? Always say thank you to somebody. Acknowledge that it's resolved and that it works now. I've got a few questions for you. And remember, all I said was just ask 3 insightful questions. Do you know what caused the error message in the first place? Was it a missing dimension value or something else? That's a good question. How often do you encounter errors like this when posting purchase orders? Is it common or rare? Not a bad question either. How do you usually troubleshoot these errors? Tips or best practices that you can share? That one might not be the best one. But what I'm finding is that these are little memory joggers saying, oh yeah, that is a good question. And then you have 2 or 3 other thoughts that kind of follow on from that. And if you like this response as it is, you can just say keep it, and it's going to pop it in the email as your draft response. Or you can tweak it a little bit. You can make it longer, shorter, make it sound more formal, direct or casual, or again, the famous make it a poem in there. But you do get a chance here without you being the author, you're the editor of it, to tweak it a little bit.
And a key reminder when you, okay, you're going to do keep it. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
I was always afraid it was going to send an email on my behalf.
No. This is why my name is on the to list on this one. So again,
what it did do is it put it into the email. You can still go in and edit everything, delete it, change it, add extra stuff, say the thank you. It's not sending an email for you. You're into draft mode of your own email.
Yeah, the human in the loop has got to click send. All it's going to do is copy and paste it in there for you, basically. So you can see that if you have some people in your organization that really struggle with the written word and the written communication, and you're seeing some emails that you cringe a little bit, whether it is syntax or whether it's spelling or whether it's abruptness, this is a tool that you can get into their hands that's immediately going to improve the quality of their written communication. I've seen it in practice with a handful of people. And what it does is it really takes somebody that is not very good at written communication and it moves them up into the bucket of good to, really good communication skills. So that's the email reply and the Copilot response. But let's take a look at the coaching now. And this is a little technique that I like to use is, of course, we just use Copilot to help us with the draft. Well, what happens if we do a little loop right now and we ask Copilot to evaluate and coach itself on the tone, the sentiment, and the clarity of this email? So if I go back to the email, I basically got this draft started for all intents and purposes. And if I click on Copilot and now coaching, what it's doing is it's analyzing the email and it's analyzing my draft response, and it's coming up with some some insight into how I could make this email better. Sometimes this takes 5 seconds, 10 seconds.
I like it. I pride myself on having some fairly good emails and good writing skills, just being in marketing. And when I've done the coaching, I full on respect the best practices that it's suggesting to me. I may take 1 out of 5, I may take more, but it's that continuous improvement of back to the basics, be proud of what you've done, and do stuff properly.
Yeah. And it always breaks it down into 3 components of evaluating the tone, the sentiment, and the clarity. So in this instance, for the tone, it's saying, hey, the email's polite and professional, could also be more friendly and warm. So they make some suggestions. hey, add a greeting at the beginning of the email. Some of you may have noticed that I did not put "Hi, Kevin," or something like that at the beginning of it. Always a good place to start. It's even getting into use more positive words and phrases such as great, happy, glad, thank you, and please, things like that. Use the word you more often than I. And for any of you that pride yourself on being really good at writing an email and striking the tone, you will intuitively recognize that, yeah, this is best practice. Not a lot of people actually know that intuitively. They sort of have to be told a little bit, and the coaching by Copilot helps a lot. If we look at the sentiment, it's saying the email asks the readers for their feedback and cooperation, but it can also make them feel more valued and respected for their work and expertise. So the first suggestion is acknowledge their contribution and achievement resolving of it. For example, you could say, you did a great job in resolving the issue. You've shown remarkable skill and patience in fixing it. These are some really good advices. The interesting thing here with the coaching, it does not offer you that one magic button that says, hey, take these ones and incorporate them into the email. Now you're really into the human editing of you copy and paste this stuff, and then you would update your draft. When it gets to the clarity, the email is clear about the main purpose, but could be more specific and concise. So eliminate unnecessary words or phrases such as, if you don't mind, in the first place as well. And I'm not a big fan of that. If you don't mind, I have some questions. It's our job to have some questions. We can frame that nicely, but I'm not a big fan of the if you don't mind. But again, kind of illustrating that this, in the hands of people that struggle with the written communication, if you've got some people in your organization, this can be a game changer for them. But it's more about getting them to adopt this tool to help them with the drafts, to help them with the coaching and getting started with it.
They were really getting into not only a quantity of efficiency, but also quality.
Yes. This one very much is not just productivity, but it is quality improvements. So those are the three big use cases that I'm finding that's an immediate help for people is the teams and the meeting summaries and the email replies and the email coaching. I'm going to move on a little bit to some of the general Copilot prompts. And I've broken this down into one-click built-in prompts and custom prompts that you can use. It's a little bit easier to see this, so I'm going to flip out to the Microsoft Copilot. Once you have a license, this will be available to you at copilot.microsoft.com, or it will be available to you in Teams. And I mentioned it's a little bit tricky to get it to show up. When you first get your license, you've got to go into apps, and you've got to kind of add in the Copilot apps. And once you've got it, you can pin it to your navigation bar. And this is the place where Copilot starts to allow you to prompt specifically for data that's in your organization. And when I say one click, they have a series of prompts that they're showing you here on the home page as a helpful starter. And they also have a prompt library down here that if you're kind of stuck, you can scroll through these different prompts. And there's a pretty good chance you're going to find something that will be a good place for you to start. And if you click on See All Prompts, it actually takes you out to a Microsoft website where they're starting a prompt library, and users are blatantly copying and pasting good ideas from each other. But I want to show you this one in particular. This one is called What's the Latest From? And you'll notice that I clicked on it, it put the prompt down here, and then a /, a little bit of programming, it's a /, but you can tell it, I'm looking for the latest information from Scott Jorgens. Organize it by emails, chats, and files. And what it's going to do is it's going to go out and it's going to evaluate emails where Scott and I have been corresponding back and forth, maybe Teams chats that we've been working on, or files that we have been collaborating on. So let's
That all looks
decompose
safe to
this.
me.
Yeah. Let's decompose this a little bit. This is a summary of the emails that Scott and I were trading last night as we were preparing for this session. We have been having some chats on this topic. I can see that Scott and I have been working on this webinar, Copilot, the presentation slide deck. It's in our SharePoint, our OneDrive location. And I wasn't aware of this, but I can also see that Scott and Nikki, one of our project managers, has been working on a statement of work. I was not directly included on that document, although I have permissions for it. But because I told it I'm interested in what's the latest from Scott, it has actually informed me about other documents that Scott is working on with other people in our organization. This is an incredibly helpful thing before you go into a meeting with somebody. If you want to kind of catch up on, hey, what have we been reviewing the last week or two, or what have you been working on? You can actually ask Copilot first before you ask the person. It gets better. One of the things you're going to notice that for each one of these points, there's a little annotation. It is actually showing you what email that this is coming from. And if you click on it, it will actually open that email so that you can check the content. If you scroll down to the bottom and click here on the +6, it's showing me all of the emails, all of the chat messages, and all of the documents that it's referring to. And each one of these, if I click on it, it will allow me to open them up. That just saved me about an hour of having to go through and do a search for all the most recent emails to and from Scott, and then go into Teams and look through our Teams chat, and then try to figure out what documents and what files have we been working on. It's incredibly helpful for that one use case alone. If I start a new chat with kind of that as a grounding on it, you can do things like help me prep for a meeting. And when I do that meeting, click on that, it's actually aware of the meetings that I have on my calendar or meetings that I've had with other people in the recent history. I can also look at individual files or people or specific emails and ask it to help me prepare or to summarize for it. But I'll take a look at this. No, sorry, that's a bad one. I'll go back here and prep for a meeting. Oh, sorry, guys, it's off my list, and we're running out of time here a little bit. But the real point that I wanted to continue to make here is these prompts are one-click prompts that Microsoft has pre-written for you. And really all you have to do is who's the person, what's the meeting, or what's the file, or what's the topic that I'm interested in, and let it do the dirty grind work of going out and doing searching and consolidating all of that for you.
That's great, Kevin. Can you mention on this page too, that top left of the web versus work? I really found that of value.
Yeah, this one helps an awful lot. If you're on copilot.microsoft.com, the web page, you have two kind of different flavors here. You have a work button that everything is going to be oriented and geared towards your all of your Azure data, all of your SharePoint, Teams, Outlook, and all of that sort of thing. So it's really going to focus strictly and only on work. If you click on the web one, this is actually taking you to your general purpose everyday AI companion, where you can do things like web searches and searches for things that are not related to your company data. And it really is just that simple right now that if you're looking for something that's documents and files and emails that's for work, you want to make sure you click on work. If you're doing a web search for general queries, make sure that you're clicking on the website. I'm going to show you an example of prompting a little bit, but I do need to spend just 1 minute talking about prompting in general with Copilot. The prompts are the instructions to Copilot. This is where you tell it, what do you want it to do? What's your question? But writing good prompts is the absolute 100% biggest key to getting better outcomes with Copilot. It's the classic case. Ask a better question, get a better answer. Write a better prompt, get a better response. Now, there are lots of different prompt strategies out there, and results will vary. But the one that I've kind of chosen over the last year that I found that I have good success, the acronym would be ROSE. The first thing you want to do is specify the role that you want it to play. Tell it what the objective is, your goal or aim. Describe the specific scenario that is going to happen, and then tell it exactly what you expect the desired outcome or to do. And if you follow just those where you specify the role, give the objective, give a scenario, tell it what the expected outcome, it's going to do a pretty good job just with those 4 prompts that you're putting in there. And I'm going to give you an example. This is a long one. I won't go into the details on it, but I told it its role. You're a super Microsoft GP consultant working for an awesome consulting company in Canada. You're a senior resource and a teacher to other consultants. Your objective is to improve upon the initial timesheet notes from other consultants so that our clients fully and clearly understand what services were provided and billed for. I even told it, if you don't understand the initial timesheets, ask a clarification question. The scenario is a consultant's going to provide you with their initial timesheet notes, and you'll respond with the improved notes in concise paragraph format. Use active verbs, clear, concise languages. So here's all the outcome that I'm looking for. And this is an example. This is a timesheet note that one of our consultants put out to a client, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's short, clear, and concise, has the case number. They checked out the data. There was duplicate data cleared out. They fixed the batch and removed the corrupt batch, spelling error and all, and then they did a checklink run. I copied and pasted this in, and here's what it came back with. On review of the system data, I identified and eliminated duplicate entries to ensure data integrity. I resolved the issues with batch processing by removing corrupted batch data and successfully ran checklinks to maintain consistency. This action rectified the data discrepancies, optimized system performance for accurate reporting and processing. That's a much better explanation of what is going on. It is a better recap that we can go back to later on if that client happens to have a similar issue. We know what we did. There's more details about why we did it. But this prompting, I'll go back to the statement that good prompts is the key to getting better outcomes. There's lots of different strategies, but if you start with the ROSE model, role, objective, scenario, and expected solution, you should be able to then tweak it to start to get results that are similar to this.
And that's similar to, just to jump in, that's why Microsoft has the Copilot for Sales or the Copilot for Service, is it's preceded to say, hey, I'm a customer service person. Give me answers that are related to my cases and customer service data within my systems.
Exactly. So I am mindful of the time, everybody's lunch. What I am going to offer is I've collected some better resources that will allow you a lot more deeper dive on how to prompt and get better results with prompting, the Copilot labs, and some of the prompt engineering. We've also put together some deeper links on the concept of the Microsoft Graph for those of you that are technically inclined and want to make sure you understand the security model. If you want to reach out to Scott at the end of the meeting, I'm sure he would be happy to forward those to you. And Scott?
On to pricing. Next slide. So Microsoft Copilot is available for $488.40 per named user per year. And that's an annual subscription. You can pay that monthly or prepay upfront. Obviously, if you have more users, it makes more sense. There is an option to go on a month-to-month trial. It just costs a little bit more and some processing and headaches of just registering and unregistering and stuff like that. The Copilot for Microsoft 365 is an add-on, which means you have to have a Office 365, Microsoft 365, Business Premium or E3 or E5. There are some other versions. You have to check with your Microsoft professional, either being Endeavour or someone on your IT team. We can add this to your account without having to jump through your other hoops. It will be attached to your Microsoft cloud tenant. You can choose to go through your IT team and their procurement processes, or we can just throw this in on the side and it all gets magically merged together in the back end. So feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to help. Let's get into the next slides. And these are just sort of our wrap up, especially those watching the webinar who are new to Endeavour. So we've been around for 35 years now. Key focused areas are advisory services, implementation of CRM and ERP being Business Central and GP and NAV, Dynamics 365 CRM and the whole Power Platform, and ongoing optimization and support for our clients. We have 3 brands, the Endeavour Solutions, the GP Support North, and our purely CRM team. Thank you, Kevin. We're now up to over 900 active clients through support and integrations. You took the slide off there, Kevin.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And, a variety of office locations coast to coast, from Halifax and Montreal and Toronto off to Edmonton, Vancouver, and a mailbox down in Delaware, US. Next slide. So to reach out to, for those that are new to Endeavour, Trish and Steve, we have our contact information here as well. Many will recognize additional names within our services team, Paul and Jerry, as well as James and Johnny, and myself, Scott Jorgens. We're all here to help. If you go online to www.endeavorsolutions.com, you can find links to our other sub-brands, and in the footer has Steve's contact details. You can reach out to Steve and he can point you into the additional directions if you're unsure who to talk to best. And obviously there's the Endeavour support desk and support at Endeavour Solutions. So everyone, thank you very much for your time today. Kevin, today's webinar was on why finance should care, why finance, this works well. What's your opinion as finance is an early adopter?
Yeah, there's 2 primary reasons here, really, is, first of all, the security. Microsoft is really the only player out there right now that has really baked in the security model of that D365 service boundary and the Microsoft Graph and your permissions for files, emails, and calendars, things like that. And the data is staying exactly where it is. So, one of the big reasons would be your data is secure. It's still all in the Microsoft environment. It's not being shared out anywhere else. Second thing that I would say is that it's a product that is functional now for a good percentage of your users. They could start using it tomorrow with limited training, and it would make them better communicators in the email examples that I've shown you. And the third thing is, and this probably speaks more to the finance team, is, again, emphasizing this is not really a IT or a technical exercise. It means that it doesn't have to be pushed from the IT team. It can be pushed from the human level, from the business process level, communication level. And this starts to be the management group, the leaders within a company that can begin deploying this out. It's not so much at the mercy of IT once the licenses are in place. And for that reason, I feel that probably the finance team is one of the better advocates and champions to be able to roll this out to people.
Thanks for that, Kevin. I think that hits it right on the head. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and look forward to chatting with you on our next webinar. And obviously, we're here to help with Copilot. Bye for now.
Thanks all.